Hello everyone, it's Richard Lewis here again with another video as part of our paid sponsorship with Rivalry.gg. We've obviously been making these videos to guide you through upcoming esports events. We've got another big Counter-Strike event coming, the biggest one before the major, in the form of the DreamHack Masters Stockholm 2018. It's going to run between August 29th and September the 2nd, and has lots of top teams in attendance. So if you want to head over to Rivalry.gg and play some responsible bets on some of the matches that are going to take place here, you can sign up using the referral code RLS to qualify for up to $350 of VIP bonuses. So look, I got to give you my thoughts about what's going to happen. The reality is, this is kind of a very obvious. If you look at the teams that are attending, we have got all of the big teams. I'll give you a complete list here. It's Astralis, Greyhound, North, Tyloo in Group A. Group B is Navi, Ghost, NIP, and NRG. Group C is FaZe, Fanatic, Heroic, and Optic. And Group D is Gambit, Hellraisers, MIBR, and Mousesports. So immediately, the team we have to talk about is Astralis. I think if you follow Counter-Strike, you know that they are very obviously the best team in the world by some distance right now, capable of winning games through brute force, through individual skill, but more importantly, they are the masters of utility, smoke, Molotovs, nades. They do so much damage just with those. And then on top of it, they have just an incredible tactical system, people who can clutch. They really do have everything. It's, for me at least, I think that the kind of high bar, the highest skill we've seen in terms of team system in Counter-Strike history. So obviously they are runaway favorites for me. To put it in context, last time they were out at E-League, which they always seem to do incredibly well in, I've seen Astralis win multiple times there, and they didn't drop a single map, and they beat Liquid in 2 series, Cloud9 and Mousesports. Prior to that, they got to the final of ESL 1 Cologne, and yes, they didn't win it, despite, I think, everybody thinking they were favorites to do so. They lost to Navi, but that was predominantly down to an absolute heroic performance from Zeus, their in-game leader. Not the kind of thing you're going to see all of the time on the last map. I think if I remember rightly, Zeus dropped something like 30 against Astralis. This was like his first 30 bomb in something like 2 years. It was just one of those things, and it came on Navi's best map in the form of Inferno. Then, if you go back before that, the last time they lost a series was back in May, and that was, again, in the final of an Intel Extreme Masters event. It was in Sydney, and it was that ridiculous 3-0 that FaZe had, which is as close as a 3-0 you're ever going to see. Really was an amazing series, despite it looking incredibly one-sided on paper. So this is a team that you can say just they don't lose often. When they do lose, there's lots of mitigating circumstances around those defeats. And honestly, they've been away since E-League, tweaking, perfecting things ahead of the major, which is going to be in about 8-9 days. That's going to kick off. So, yeah, I mean, obviously, it's probably not even worth placing money on Astralis. I think they're just such runaway favorites for any tournament they enter right now, and I haven't seen any evidence to suggest they're going to look mortal, that someone's going to crack the Astralis code. Could be wrong, but I think Astralis are clear favorites for this, which then brings me to FaZe. Now, I'm kind of doing this in a rough order and giving you my thoughts about, I think Astralis are the most likely. I'm going to say FaZe, I think, should be the next likely, even though I'm sure a lot of you might be thinking, well, what about Navi? What about MIBR? FaZe are a team that have been falling short at a lot of tournaments lately, and this is understandable, honestly. Sure, their era never came about. Sure, they've had some lax performances at events. Sure, arguably, they should even have a major under their belt right now. But with all of the issues that they've had with Olofmeister, they've had stand-ins and uncertainty about the lineup, lots of pressure, lots of scrutiny, and really nowhere to go with it. They made a very conscious decision as a team that they didn't want to drop Olofmeister, that they were going to use stand-ins. Everyone else is a huge name, a huge talent. So you've kind of got to wait for either somebody to retire or have a run where they play so unbelievably bad you can justify cutting them. And nobody has really met that criteria yet. In fact, everybody at some point has been the runaway standout star that's carrying the team. Whether it's Guardian, whether it's Rain, who's been amazing, certainly wasn't at E-League, which we'll talk about in a moment. And then you're just left with, well, okay, so do you swap in game leader? I think if you do that, I think that's a disaster waiting to happen. I think Carrigan is probably the best in-game leader for a squad like this. And yeah, I think FaZe are one of those things. It's like, sure, they're not perfect. They've got problems, but what do you tweak? What do you change? I don't think you can, not now that Olaf Meister's come back. Now, on that note, if you go and look at the E-League performance that they had, Olaf coming back, I was worried. I said on By the Numbers that I didn't think he was going to be able to do anything worthwhile because he's been out the game for so long and that it's going to take him time to ease back in. Absolute nonsense, it turned out. Olaf Meister, despite having all of this time off due to personal issues, came back and was the second highest statistical performer on the team behind Nico, who was explosive at E-League and did all he could to carry his team. The problem was that the regular performance, the solid people, the Guardians, the Reigns, didn't really show up. And this is the first time Reign had looked very ordinary since in 2018, in my opinion. A lot of fans kind of got on Reigns' back and said it was all Reigns' fault. I think that's disgusting, frankly, and ridiculous. I think obviously there were some accommodations made to make Olaf Meister fit back into the team. If you look at some of the maps, it was clear that people were swapping positions around and Olaf Meister was getting some of his old positions back. When you factor it all in, it's probably not surprising that Olaf Meister did play well, but the team underperformed. They've had some time away now. They get to tinker with things, but there's no doubt E-League was brutally disappointing. They lost series to teams they wouldn't ordinarily lose to. Namely Fanatic and Mousesports, and you could usually rely on FaZe to beat both of them with their eyes closed. If you look at the story that came out of Cologne, they ran up against Big, who they've had issues with before in the past. I don't know if it's a stylistic thing. Big were on their miracle run at ESL1 Cologne, obviously made it all the way to the final. Maybe it's forgivable then that they didn't fuck with destiny too much and kind of fell by the wayside in honor of the better storyline. But the tournament prior to that, if you go back just a little bit further, Belo Horizonte in Brazil, in June, they did win that over Mousesports 3-2. It was back and forth. Mousesports very, very close, and they did that with the stand-in Kroman, the Norwegian player. So winning isn't some crazy distant memory for FaZe. They're still very capable of it, and I know how Carrigan operates. I've been around him and his teams for many, many years now. Carrigan's the kind of guy who is going to pull the players together and say, look, we were pretty bad at E-League, but we've got this month to get everything resolved before DreamHack, and I think you're going to see a very different FaZe. Then if you add to that the spice of the $1 million Intel Grand Slam that's put up, and if you've not been following this, basically for all the recognized Intel events on the circuit, if you can win 4 in the span of a year, you get $1 million as a bonus. Now, FaZe have to win this event because I think it's their ESL1 New York event is about to drop off from a year ago. It'll fall outside of the catchment area for a year. So by winning this event, they would secure that $1 million. That's going to be an extra bit of motivation. That's why I know these guys are going to have boot camped very, very hard. They're going to come in incredibly well prepared, and then it just comes down to execution. I think you can rely on Olaf Meister to maintain that level of form. I think it's going to be Guardian and Rain that are going to be stepping up, and I think FaZe could be a solid bet to take the event in its entirety. And I also know as well, should they run up against Astralis, Carrigan's going to be studying their demos, studying them, probably believes he's on collision course with that team once again, a team that he's had so many back and forths with since he left. The next team would have to be Navi. I do feel like I'm in a nightmare right now, I'm not going to lie to you. It feels like ever since I said Navi wouldn't win tournaments as long as they kept both Edward and Zeus on the roster, they seem to have done nothing but win tournaments with Edward and Zeus on the roster. So it's kind of a bitter pill to swallow because I still stand by it. I mean, what I couldn't have predicted was that Simple, best player in the world, hands down, would have this unbelievable level of carry potential for so long. And on top of that, Electronic would start to get up to a very similar level, honestly, a terrifying level of form. And Flamey would be just behind them both in terms of his output. And obviously, we've had these anomalies like where Zeus throws in a good performance where it's needed, and Edward throws in a good performance when it's needed. If you look at the tournaments they've won, there's just no doubt these are the number 2 team in the world right now. They won the CSGO Asian Championships, the Star Series, and ESL One Cologne all in a row. But you've got to start asking now, is that the end of the story? Are the wheels going to start coming off? Because they had shaky wins against Fanatic and Mousesports at E-League before Liquid dispatched them very comfortably. And then if you go out and you look at all the news and all the stories and everything that's been circulating prior to this event, apparently they were going to use a stand-in. Flamey wasn't meant to be at this event. Now, nobody really knows the reason why, but it's not a surprise to me that it's Flamey whose name comes up again as being somebody that maybe is in and out of the team. This is about the 3rd time it's happened in recent memory. Obviously, he's somebody who's unsettled and maybe wants to pursue his options. I suspect it is a working relationship problem with Zeus, who is absolutely notoriously very brutal in how he delivers feedback. Flamey, on the other hand, not that personality archetype, doesn't like people getting in his face. And just by looking at it, Navi's a very hostile sink-or-swim environment. Flamey is probably the most delicate, if you want to use that term, in terms of all the personalities in that team. I think he's been looking for the exit door for some time. I even think he would take playing in a lesser team to be happier. That's the vibe that I get. So they actually practiced with 2 different stands-in, one of which I think was Dimasic, prior to this event. I don't know how much practice they've put in with Flamey. So that is something to definitely factor in. But I'll also add, this team has a long history of problems internally. If you think about, you don't have to go that far back to when Simple and Flamey were talking to Immortals and maybe going to leave. And since then, they've gone and won tournaments and put it all behind him. Simple, when he was back in the team and didn't sign that long contract, looked like he was going to leave at one point. They were still on that upward trajectory, and they went out and got Electronic to make him feel more comfortable that he was going to have a wingman, somebody else who could carry the burden. So this is a team that's always been fractious, but have always found a way to kind of turn around the adversity and channel it into something good. They remind me a lot of old school Virtus Pro in that sense. So yeah, I got to say that even with all the problems coming in, they wouldn't be my pick. But certainly just on current form, I think the group they're in, and Group B, as I said, their first game is going to be against Ghost. There's very long odds on that one. We're going to find out very quickly, I think, just how much the Flamey issue has rocked Navi and whether or not this is going to be a long-term problem. I looked at the odds just prior to this. Ghost odds were, as you can imagine, very long. I think if I was going to have a punt, just to like put a little bit of money on something, I would probably bet on Ghost to catch Navi cold in the opening game. I think Wardell was absolutely outstanding in the Zotac Masters. Kusta too. I think that is probably out of all of the first round matchups, if you wanted to go with a massive underdog, that's where I would go because of all the problems Navi have had. But that being said, I've seen Navi course correct at other tournaments where they've had terrible day ones. Think about, I think it was the Star Series day one where they lost to Tai Lu on day one and they just get away, Zeus does his thing, and they come back and they win the whole tournament. So Navi will be there or thereabouts, but I like that game as a big surprise pick. Anyway, the other team, the fourth team I wanted to choose, probably is an obvious one, all things considered, is MIBR. Now, I did another one of these videos for the Zotac Cup. $300,000 prize pool. Everything about that video was wrong, except I did call that MIBR were going to win it, and I said that they had to win it. So, thankfully, there was something salvageable from that video in the sense that I keep a little bit of credibility because I did say who was going to win. Now, what's been going on with MIBR? Pretty much a repeat of what I said in the Zotac video, and that is that they have thrown so much money to get this lineup together, this strange mix of North American players, Brazilian players, all of the power imbalance, all of the arguments between, again, a notoriously fractious relationship, star player Coldzera, in-game leader, mastermind, tactician, and all-round CS god Fallen, not necessarily getting along, having a fractious working relationship, Cold Zero wanting to be the in-game leader, Fallen losing a bit of his mojo. That all has been smoothed out with the introduction of Yanko as coach. And what's interesting is, if you go and look at what they've been doing, they had this boot camp prior to Zotac. I'll also tell you something, the best kind of boot camp for a big tournament is going to another tournament. And a lot of pros will tell you this. If there's an opportunity to go to a tournament where you're maybe not going to give up too many tactics, but you're going to get used to the regimen of sleeping hours and competing, and you can do one just before another event, and it's not going to make you too jet-lagged and fucked up, a lot of teams will swear by doing that. And I think that was part of the plan. I think that's why MIBR in particular targeted that tournament, because, again, this is a massive tournament here, $250,000 up for grabs, lots of top teams, and this is where MIBR can announce that they're back. Now, sure, they didn't have to beat very good teams. You know, they're playing MVP PK, they're playing Flash, they're playing Kingwin, all teams that they should beat, but MIBR didn't drop a map at Zotac, and crucially, Cold Zero was posting great numbers, Stewie was posting great numbers, and Fallen was the MVP of the tournament, and that to me is the absolute vitally important part here. If you get Fallen back to believing in himself, you get Fallen back to hitting the ludicrous AWP shots of 2016, 2017, MIBR will always have a puncher's chance of winning any series they go into. Now, I think they're a long way off tactically. Astralis, I would even say FaZe. I don't think they have any player that can stand toe-to-toe with Simple. You know, think back to that sort of tantalizing prospect again. I think it was at Cologne where we were going to see Cold Zero and Simple go head-to-head. And that matchup, in terms of big numbers, lasted one map. You know, MIBR just don't really... You know, the star power isn't quite as strong. So all of the teams that I've named before them, I think, would be favorites in a series. But again, there's this new life that's been breathed into the team by Yanko coming in. And they also should be the team coming in out of all of those other ones I mentioned that are in the best shape because they've just been to a tournament in Hong Kong and they've just won. So I think MIBR, for me, are kind of out of all of the top teams that are there. Even though they're in a group with Mousesports, and I think Mousesports were meant to be like the kind of number one seed in that group. For me, MIBR have more of a chance of winning the tournament than Mousesports, which I'll come to in a moment when I talk about my dark horses. Now, dark horse picks, I've picked out 3 teams in particular, and such is the strength and depth, they're not really dark horses. There's the first one I think is a very long shot, but it's one you should all really consider at home. It's NRG. Now, NRG had some horrendous disappointment at the NA Minor, a really weak NA Minor. I'm loving the emergence of E-United, but honestly, E-United should not be beating the likes of NRG. I think the other team they lost to was Complexity, if memory serves me correctly. And at that point, I kind of felt, well, that's that, isn't it? You know, this team's had a great run, but they're just not going to be able to bounce back from that kind of crushing defeat against local lower opposition. It's usually the kind of thing that breaks NA teams apart, but that didn't happen. They then went and, I think first they made mincemeat of everyone in the Star Series NA qualifier. I mean, they definitely got some revenge over Complexity. Again, everybody they played, they beat 2-0. They're going to be at Star Series again. Just looked really, really good. And then IEM Shanghai, they went and had series wins over Hellraisers, over Gambit, and Tai Lu, beat the Chinese team in China and did it in unbelievable fashion. Cirque absolutely fucking went off. He won the MVP for that tournament and proved, you know, this sustained period of form he's had right now. He's like the best AWPer in NA. This is a player that, again, you know, NRG really need to keep delivering because he's got a big target on him from every other organization that needs to pick up a high-quality AWPer, be it in Europe, be it in North America. Now, this is also, this tournament level is kind of reminiscent of the Star Series that NRG played where they made it to the final and basically lost to Navi, and they had that miracle run. And there they beat Liquid, they beat North, they beat Hellraisers, they beat Renegades. So if you remove the poor performance at the minor, if you just delete the minor from their results and you look across June till now, the only teams they've lost to are Liquid and Navi. That's very high caliber opposition. They're both teams that I believe are in the top 5 on HLTV currently. So that tells you in itself like how good this team can actually be. They're going to be starting off against NIP. Not a lot of history between the two teams. If you go back to December 2017, the core of the NRG lineup, back playing with the Danish player Ange, who was subsequently removed, did beat them 16-14. That was back when NIP still had exist. So that's pretty much it. There's not really a lot of results or data out there in terms, but I just think NRG are on a roll. They're feeling really good with the IEM Shanghai win. I think if I wanted to bet on a team to have a surprise deep run and beat some bigger names and higher ranked teams, I still think NRG are in that beautiful spot of being very, very good, but not so good that teams would look at them and prepare for them specifically. I think they'll catch a lot of teams cold. I think they'll have a deep run here. I mean, it's conceivable they could go to the semis for me, at least. So I think out of all the dark horse picks I've named here, NRG would be the one I think you could probably make the most of a return on. Then next, it would probably be Mousesports. I think we can all agree Mousesports have had just a rash of internal issues for a long time now. If you think back to Belo Horizonte, where Oscar didn't go for some reason, we don't know why. He was at home streaming during that period. Was it illness? I think he just wanted to sit an event out, or for some reason didn't want to go to Brazil. Who knows? And they had to use Nothing as a stand-in. And then they removed Stico, who's now a stand-in for Cloud9. They brought in Snacks. There's been a lot going on. And the reality is, the team has been slowly going backwards since the end of 2017, where, if you remember, they made it all the way up to that number 2 ranking, but then have just been slowly falling away, currently ranked number 5. That in itself might be a little bit flattering, because I wouldn't say they're a comfortable 5, that they would beat, the 6, the 7, the 8. I wouldn't believe that at all. I think Mousesports are a team that's going to be mobile in one direction or the other over the next month. I don't think it's sort of they're going to stay there. I think we're going to find out very quickly whether this Snacks move is going to work or not. Since they brought in Snacks, their first outing with Snacks was pretty bad. It was at ESL1 Cologne. They lost to G2. Maybe that's excusable on your day, although I think a team at Mousesports should be beating G2, honestly. And Ents, the Finns, they lost 2-0 to miss out on the chance of going to the German stadium. So that's pretty crazy in and of itself. I mean, again, I've been loving the development of Ents, but you think about the experience Mousesports has and the level of performance. And this was all happening, by the way, while Chris J was still being an absolute godhead. Chris J, one of the most unsung legendary players in World Counter-Strike, just does everything for his team. And if you look at the statistics from Snacks, his form actually, it wasn't that he got a new lease of life being in a new team. I think he was one of, if not the lowest, he was the second lowest statistical performer on Mousesports at this event, and it was pretty much in line with how he had been playing at Virtus Pro, honestly. Now, obviously, new team, got to have time to make it work. We're going to see what happens, but they did make it to the semi-finals of E-League. They were comfortably beaten by Astralis there. It was like 16-10, 16-11 or something on both maps. Not really, this is a dark horse I don't really have a lot of faith in. I'm kind of just hoping, and I imagine a lot of Mousesports fans feel the same way, you're kind of hoping they can make this Snacks pickup work somehow by finding a system. I think it just puts so much pressure on Chris J to think about how to move people around and what positions. They've had a bit of time since E-League to do it, obviously. We might see a renewed Mousesports, but they've got a pretty tough start, honestly. They're starting up against Gambit in their group, and out of the last 6 times they've played a map against Gambit, Gambit have beaten them 4 times. So it's not like Gambit themselves are some sort of like team that you would just back them to beat all the time. Actually, probably Gambit should be slight favourites for that, rankings notwithstanding, just on you if you go on current form. So I think Mousesports are going to have a tough time. Like I say, they're definitely a dark horse pick, but I wouldn't put any money on them. Absolutely not. And then the last one might surprise a few people because, look, you've got North in there. I'm not gonna. I just will never back an MSL team. I think it's too idiosyncratic, too many mental issues. I would have probably picked Hellraisers in this, if you can believe it or not. But with all of the issues they've had, and they've got to use a stand-in because of the visa issues for Woxic, then no. So I can't in good conscience recommend them. Tyloo broke my heart at the Zotac Masters, so my Tyloo fanboying has to be put to one side. So it's got to be Fnatic. And Fnatic are a team that over the course of the past 3 months, they've been steadily improving by inches. They're slithering along, slowly getting better. People are finding form. And it's almost imperceptible. You almost forget where they were 4 months ago, 5 months ago. But JW's coming back. He's starting to find some form. He's been getting positive score lines. Obviously, Flusher's having more and more of those old school Flusher moments. Crims has been an absolute standout. And if you kind of look at where Fnatic are positioned, what's happening to them is they're losing to teams that are comfortably ranked above them. You know, they lost to FaZe and Astralis in Sydney, in the IEM Sydney. They lost to Team Liquid at the ECS Finals. They lost to FaZe again in Cologne. They lost to Navi and Mousesports at E-League. Well, none of these things would be a surprise if the rankings were basically just how you picked winners and losers. So I think that trend eventually has to break, right? And why wouldn't it be in Sweden, home soil? You know, they've just come off a holiday. They get to roll up to an event that's local to them. And I think they're going to be feeling pretty good, pretty relaxed. I think the group that they're in, they're up against some teams that, you know, they've got nothing to be worried about apart from FaZe. And let me just double check this. If I remember rightly, I think their first match, yes, it is. It's against Optic. Well, Optic, we just savaged them on By the Numbers. They were an absolute embarrassment at the Zotac Cup, getting mauled by Ghost the way they did. And sure, credit to Ghost, but when's this Optic team going to turn up? I think Fnatic are going to relish the opportunity to savage some Danes in Sweden to start the tournament off. And like I say, JW's on the come-up. Crims is on the come-up. Flush is on the come-up. They've got Exist in there, still fancying himself as an in-game leader. I think what's interesting is, even though I still will never stand by Exist as an in-game leader of choice, all of the other players are really, they've wanted to play with Exist for so long. It's crazy. So you're left with one big question mark for Fnatic, and that is Draken. Now, Draken's had 2 events with Fnatic. First time out was Cologne. That was his lowest ranked event, I think, since sort of turning pro and being a serious player. So it was very, very bad. He still has consistency problems. He still can hit an amazing shot 1 second and miss a very obvious one. Seems to have trouble producing multiple kills when it's required of him. And again, think about that. When you're constantly putting the most important gun in the game in somebody's hands and they're not producing with it, this is kind of getting to a level of almost, you know, Skadoodle-esque proportions, where Draken, if he wants to be taken seriously, has got to start delivering. Now, I know the guy. I've talked to the dude about it. One of the issues he always felt was kind of holding him back was that, you know, in terms of NIP, he wasn't a very good personality fit. He raged a little bit too much for them. He got a little bit too hot-tempered, and that's not how NIP like to play at all. Now, in Fnatic, he's got similar big emotion personalities, people who like to win, people who get fired up by people shouting and getting pumped up around him. I think it's probably a better cultural fit for Draken, but again, he's got to go out there and he's got to produce. Now, I keep saying it. I think Draken's going to produce at some point. I think he's going to find the level of consistency, get over the yips, and do the business. If it's going to happen in this lineup, you know, why not here? It's as good a tournament as any. You're going to be going up against opponents that are there for the taking, people who you can get. And if his confidence builds across this tournament, I think Fnatic could go very far. And like I say, if I wanted to pick a big team that could potentially win from nowhere, it would probably be Fnatic for me. All they would need to do is win 1 or 2 series against better teams. Maybe the final boss of Astralis, maybe they get lucky and swerve them, who knows. But yes, Fnatic could be a very good outside bet indeed. So there we have it. Those are my thoughts for this tournament. And as I said, if you are interested in placing some bets on this one, make sure you do it responsibly. Make sure you do it at a site that you know that you can trust. And of course, that's rivalry.gg. Go and sign up. They're using the referral code to support this channel. RLS, you'll qualify for up to $350 of bonuses, and it would be great if you were to do that. Anyway, hope you've enjoyed listening to my thoughts. Enjoy the tournament, and we'll see you on the next video.